It was a warm afternoon when the parking lot outside the grocery store began to quiet down. Most of the shoppers had already left and only a few cars were scattered around. The air was still, carrying faint sounds of distant traffic and chirping birds. A young man named Ryan walked out of the store after finishing his shift. He worked long hours but never complained. He was tired, sure, but he was happy to be heading home in his silver sedan that he'd saved up for over the years. That car wasn't fancy or new, but to him, it meant independence. He walked with slow steps, holding a small brown bag with snacks he'd bought before leaving. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. He pressed his car key to unlock the doors and the lights blinked. That small sound always gave him a sense of comfort, a reminder that the car was truly his. But before he could open the door, a sharp voice echoed across the lot.
"Hey, what do you think you're doing?"
Ryan turned around, startled. A woman was walking toward him with quick, angry steps. She looked to be in her late 40s, wearing large sunglasses and clutching her phone tightly, as if ready to use it as a weapon. Her tone was accusing from the very first word. Ryan blinked, confused. "Excuse me?" he asked politely. She pointed at the car. "That's my car. Don't even think about touching it." For a moment, Ryan thought she was joking. Maybe she had mistaken him for someone else. But her expression didn't change, and she was serious, her face red with anger. He let out a small, nervous laugh. "Ma'am, this is my car. I've owned it for 3 years. Don't lie to me," she snapped, moving closer. "I've seen this car in my neighborhood. You probably stole it. I'm calling the police right now." Ryan's calm started to slip. "Ma'am, please, there's no need for that. I can show you my registration and ID." But she didn't listen. Her voice grew louder as she began pacing back and forth, muttering about how people these days think they can take whatever they want. A few people in the distance began to notice. Some paused near their cars, watching the strange argument unfold. Ryan didn't want trouble. He had always been taught to stay polite no matter how absurd a situation got. "I understand you're upset," he said softly. "But this car really belongs to me. You can see the plates and I can show you the papers." The woman stepped closer, squinting at him through her sunglasses. "Show me right now," she demanded. Ryan took out his wallet, pulling out his license and car registration. He held them out so she could see, but she barely glanced before scoffing. "These could be fake." "Do you think I'm stupid?" he sighed quietly. "No, ma'am, not at all. But these are real. I work at the store just there," he said, pointing to the grocery sign. "You can ask anyone who knows me." Her voice rose again. "You think you can trick me with your little story? I know a thief when I see one." At that point, a few shoppers had gathered at a safe distance, watching the scene. Some whispered to each other, and one person even began recording with their phone. Ryan could feel his face warming with embarrassment. He wasn't doing anything wrong, but it looked like a full-blown argument in public. The woman continued ranting, circling the car and inspecting it like a detective. "Yes, this is exactly my model," she muttered. "Same color, same shape. You can't fool me." Ryan rubbed his forehead, trying to stay calm. "Cars can look the same," he said gently. "Maybe yours just looks like this one." "Oh, please," she shot back, rolling her eyes. "I know every little detail of my car. Even that scratch near the door handle. I remember it clearly." Ryan blinked in disbelief. He leaned down and looked. The scratch she mentioned had been there for years, from a grocery cart that rolled into it one rainy afternoon. It really was his car. "Ma'am," he said again, "this is my car. I can even start it right now and show you. Don't you dare." She yelled, "If you touch that car again, I'll call the police right now." Ryan froze for a moment, unsure what to do. He looked around helplessly. A couple nearby exchanged glances, clearly realizing how unreasonable the situation had become. One of them whispered to another, "That's the same woman who yelled at the mailman last week." Ryan's chest tightened. He didn't want to be on the news or in some viral video for the wrong reasons. He'd seen enough stories online about innocent people getting accused of ridiculous things. All he wanted was to go home. "Ma'am," he tried one last time, "please, you're making a mistake. I promise you, this car belongs to me," but she was already dialing 911. "Yes, hello?" she said loudly, making sure everyone could hear. "I'd like to report a theft in progress. There's a man here breaking into my car." Ryan's heart sank. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice shaking slightly. "Why would you call the police for nothing?" "Because I'm not stupid," she snapped. You can't just walk around here thinking you can take what doesn't belong to you." He took a step back, exhaling deeply. He didn't want to appear threatening, but he also didn't want to walk away. That would make him look guilty. So he stood quietly beside the car, staring at the ground, waiting for the sirens he knew were coming. A few moments later, the woman ended the call and crossed her arms, looking triumphant. "We'll see what the police have to say about this," she said. Ryan nodded slightly. "Yes, we will." Silence filled the air for a few seconds. Then someone from the small crowd spoke up. "Miss, maybe you're mistaken. He works here. I've seen him drive that car every day." The woman glared at the person who spoke. "And how do I know you're not covering for him?" The bystander threw up their hands. "Lady, come on. Not everything is a conspiracy." Ryan wanted to smile, but he couldn't. The whole situation had gone too far. He stood still, trying to remember his breathing techniques his mother had taught him years ago. Deep breaths, slow and steady. The woman began pacing again, muttering under her breath. "Unbelievable. The nerve of some people. Just wait until the police get here." Ryan looked toward the sky. It was turning darker now. The golden light had faded into gray. The wind had picked up slightly, brushing against his shirt. He wished he could just vanish from that parking lot. Every passing minute felt heavier than the last. Then he heard faint sirens in the distance. His stomach turned. Even though he had done absolutely nothing wrong, the thought of police cars pulling up because of a false accusation made him nervous. He could already imagine the looks from people who didn't know the full story. The woman smiled smugly when the sirens grew louder. "Finally," she said. "Now you'll learn your lesson." Ryan didn't reply. He just folded his arms and waited. While they waited, she kept talking, her tone full of self-importance. "You know, I have a great eye for suspicious behavior. I've helped stop things like this before. You picked the wrong person today." Ryan couldn't help but wonder what made people act like that, so sure of themselves even when they were wrong. He thought about all the times he'd seen similar stories online, and never believed something like that could happen to him. Within minutes, flashing blue and red lights reflected off the store windows. 2 police cars rolled into the lot and parked near them. The officers stepped out, scanning the situation carefully. The woman immediately rushed toward them, pointing at Ryan. "That's him!" "That's the man who tried to steal my car." Ryan felt his heart race as the officers approached. The crowd stayed silent. One officer walked toward him while the other spoke with the woman. The one near Ryan spoke calmly. "Sir, can I ask what's going on here?" Ryan nodded. "Of course, officer. I just finished work and was unlocking my car when she came over accusing me of stealing it. I have my registration and ID right here." The officer nodded, taking the papers and glancing at them. Everything looked normal. Meanwhile, the woman's voice echoed in the background as she told her version of the story. Loud, emotional and full of exaggerations. Ryan stood quietly, waiting for the officer to finish checking his documents. The officer gave a small nod of understanding and said, "All right, just stay calm for a moment." He then turned and exchanged a look with his partner, who seemed to be realizing what was happening. Ryan's hands trembled slightly. He wasn't scared of being arrested. He was scared of being misunderstood. The woman, still talking nonstop, pointed at the car again. "I've seen this exact car parked near my street." "He must have followed me here." The officer asked her calmly, "Do you have proof that this car belongs to you?" Her confidence faltered for the first time. She stammered, "Well, not right now, but I know it's mine. I can tell by the color." The other officer sighed quietly. Ryan could see it in their faces. They knew she was wrong. But for now, no one said anything. The scene was still tense. The officers began checking the car's plate number, and Ryan waited quietly beside them, his chest tight with frustration and disbelief. The air around them felt heavy, and the crowd that had gathered started whispering softly, sensing the truth starting to surface. Ryan looked down at his hands, then back at his car. He couldn't believe that an ordinary day had turned into this, a misunderstanding so wild that even he couldn't have made it up if he tried. He didn't know it yet. But that parking lot moment was only the beginning of something that would soon spread far beyond that quiet corner, because what was about to happen next would completely turn the situation around. The flashing blue and red lights painted the quiet parking lot with color. The crowd that had gathered earlier stepped back a little. giving the officer space to move. Ryan stood beside his silver sedan, hands resting calmly at his sides, trying to breathe normally. He wasn't angry and just tired. Tired of being accused of something that made no sense. One of the officers, a tall man with a calm voice, walked up to him again. "All right, sir. Can you confirm your name and address for me?" Ryan handed over his driver's license. "Yes, of course," he said. "And this is the car registration. It matches my name." The officer looked at the papers carefully, nodding slightly as he read them. Then he looked toward his partner, who was now dealing with the woman who had caused the commotion. She was speaking fast, waving her hands, pointing at Ryan and repeating the same accusation again and again. "He's lying," she was saying. "He must have stolen my documents too. That's what thieves do." "He's too calm. That's suspicious." Ryan exhaled through his nose, holding back the frustration that was building inside. He didn't want to say anything that might make things worse. He just wanted the truth to come out. The first officer handed back his papers. "Everything seems to be in order," he said softly. "Just stay here while we verify a few things." Ryan nodded. "Of course, officer." He watched as the officer walked back to the patrol car to run the license plate through the system. The woman kept talking nonstop, her voice loud and emotional, making it sound as if something terrible had happened to her. People around began whispering to one another, realizing how absurd her story sounded. A few of them were still recording with their phones. Ryan noticed but didn't say anything. At that point, it didn't matter. Maybe those videos would finally show the truth. As the officer typed into his onboard computer, Ryan glanced over at the woman. She was now talking about how she had seen that exact same car parked near her street, insisting it had been following her for days. Her voice trembled slightly, mixing anger and drama. The officer standing with her remained patient but skeptical. "Ma'am, are you sure this is your car?" he asked. "Do you have any proof? Registration, insurance, or maybe a photo of you with the vehicle?" The woman paused. Her confidence flickered for the first time. "Well, no," she admitted. "Not right now, but I'm sure it's mine." "Look at the color." "It's identical." The officer's tone softened, but there was a hint of disbelief. "Ma'am, car colors can be the same. There are thousands of silver sedans in this city." She crossed her arms tightly. "You don't understand. I know what I'm talking about. This is my car." Meanwhile, the other officer returned from the patrol car holding a small notepad. He glanced at Ryan. "Sir, the registration checks out. The vehicle is registered under your name and there are no reports of it being stolen." Ryan gave a small, tired smile. "Thank you, officer." The woman's head snapped toward them. "What do you mean, his name? That can't be right. The system must be wrong." The officers exchanged looks. One of them sighed quietly. "Ma'am, the system isn't wrong. The license plate matches the registration and owner's ID. This car belongs to him." For a moment there was silence. The woman blinked, clearly not expecting that. Her lips parted slightly as if she wanted to speak but couldn't find the right words. The crowd that had gathered stayed quiet, waiting to see how she'd respond. Then, instead of apologizing, she raised her chin and said, "Well, maybe he's using fake papers. You never know these days. People can forge anything." Ryan almost laughed out loud, but he held it in. He just looked at the ground and shook his head. The officer closest to her spoke calmly. "Ma'am, I understand you may have been mistaken, but making false accusations and calling emergency services for something like this is serious. It's important that people only call 911 when there's an actual emergency." She looked taken aback. "Are you saying this isn't an emergency?" "I was trying to help." The officer nodded slowly. "I understand that, but next time, please verify before making a report." "This man hasn't done anything wrong." The woman glanced around, noticing the crowd watching her. The realization started sinking in that she might be the one who looked foolish now. Her expression shifted, anger turning into embarrassment. She muttered something under her breath about just being cautious and trying to protect the community. Ryan stood silently, not gloating, not arguing. He didn't want to make her feel worse, even though she had completely humiliated him minutes earlier. He just wanted to move on. After a few quiet moments, one of the bystanders stepped closer and said, "Officer, I recorded the whole thing if you need it." The woman turned sharply toward the person. "Why would you record me?" "That's an invasion of privacy." The bystander replied calmly, "You are yelling in a public parking lot and accusing someone of stealing. I thought it was safer to have proof. The officer nodded. Thank you. Please keep the video in case we need it. Ryan could tell the situation was almost over, but the woman wasn't ready to let go yet. She began to backpedal, her tone changing from anger to fake politeness. Well, maybe I overreacted, she said stiffly. But you can't blame me for being cautious. You hear stories all the time about people getting their cars stolen. I was just trying to do the right thing. Ryan looked at her for the first time since the officers had arrived. His voice was calm but tired. I understand wanting to be safe, but sometimes taking a moment to listen can stop all this from happening. She looked away, pretending not to hear him. The officer closest to Ryan gave him a small nod of respect, almost an apology through his eyes. Sir, I'm sorry for the trouble. You're free to go. You've handled this very well. Ryan nodded back. Thank you, officer. I just want to go home. As he opened his car door, he could hear the woman still trying to explain herself to the other officer, her voice softer now, mixed with frustration and shame. He started the car, the familiar hum of the engine giving him a sense of relief. The officer motioned for him to go ahead, and he slowly drove away from the parking lot. The crowd began to disperse, murmuring quietly as the flashing lights faded behind him. But even as he drove down the quiet streets, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that something about the moment would stick with him for a long time. It wasn't just the false accusation. It was how quickly it all happened. How easily someone's word could turn an ordinary day into a nightmare. He stopped at a red light, resting his hands on the steering wheel. Through the windshield, he watched the light reflect off passing cars and thought about what had just happened. One phone call, one quick assumption, and his whole day had flipped upside down. He wondered what would have happened if the officers hadn't believed him, or if he hadn't stayed calm. It could have gone much worse. After a moment, he let out a long sigh and whispered to himself, "You did nothing wrong. Just breathe." When he finally reached home, the quiet of his apartment was almost overwhelming. He dropped his keys on the counter and sat on the couch, staring at nothing. The sound of the woman's angry voice still echoed faintly in his mind. A few hours later, his phone buzzed. A friend from work had messaged him. "Dude, are you okay?" Someone posted a video from the parking lot. "You're on it." Ryan frowned, opening the link. Sure enough, there it was. A short clip showing the woman shouting the police cars and him standing beside his car with his hands calm and steady. The video was spreading quickly, shared across different platforms. The title read, "Woman calls 911 on man for using his own car." Ryan couldn't decide whether to laugh or feel sick. He never wanted attention, but there it was. His quiet moment of frustration now turning into a public story. Still, as he read through the comments, something strange happened. Most people were on his side. They praised him for staying calm and respectful. Others criticized how quickly people jumped to conclusions without checking facts. Some even said the woman had been seen before in similar situations. Ryan didn't know how to feel. A part of him was relieved that people saw the truth, but another part just wanted to forget the whole thing ever happened. He closed his phone and leaned back against the couch. The hum of the city outside his window filled the room. For a moment he thought about the woman, about what had made her so quick to accuse someone she didn't know. Maybe fear, maybe pride, maybe something else entirely. He realized something important that night. Sometimes people act out of fear, and that fear blinds them to the truth. But what mattered was how one responded to it. Staying calm, even when wrongly accused, could make all the difference. He didn't know that the next few days would bring even more attention, or that the story would reach people far beyond his city. All he knew then was that he'd faced something unfair and handled it with patience. As he turned off the lights and lay in bed, the last thought that crossed his mind was simple. Sometimes doing nothing wrong can still lead to chaos, but what defines you is how you handle it when it comes. And in that quiet darkness, he finally drifted off to sleep, unaware that the story of that parking lot would soon become something much bigger than he ever imagined. The next morning, Ryan woke up earlier than usual. He didn't sleep much the night before. His mind kept replaying the scene in the parking lot. The woman's angry voice, the flashing lights, and the way everyone stared at him like he was a suspect. Even though the officers had cleared everything, the memory still sat heavy in his chest. He made a cup of coffee and sat by the window, watching the quiet street outside. The world looked peaceful, almost as if yesterday never happened. But the messages on his phone told a different story. Overnight, the video from the parking lot had spread fast. People from his town, and even strangers, were sharing it. Some praised his calmness. Others expressed shock at how easily things could go wrong for an innocent person. Ryan wasn't used to this kind of attention. He lived a simple life. He went to work, came home, cooked his meals, and sometimes watched movies on weekends. That was it. Being the center of a viral story wasn't something he ever wanted. When he arrived at work that morning, a few coworkers looked at him differently. Some smiled and nodded, others whispered quietly. His manager approached him at the entrance. "Hey, you doing all right?" she asked kindly. Ryan gave a small smile. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just trying to move past it." "I saw the video," she said softly. "That was rough. You handled it well, though. Not everyone could have stayed that calm." "Thanks," he replied, feeling a mix of pride and discomfort. "I just didn't want to make it worse." The day went on slowly. Every now and then, someone brought up the incident, but Ryan tried to steer the conversation elsewhere. He didn't want to relive it again and again, but deep down, he knew something about that moment had changed him. He realized how fragile reputation could be, how quickly people judge even without facts. Later that evening, as he walked back to the same parking lot where everything had happened, he couldn't help but feel tense. His car was parked in almost the same spot. The memory came rushing back, the woman shouting, the crowd, the flashing lights. He unlocked the car and sat quietly for a moment. The air felt heavier there, like the place still carried the echoes of what had happened. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Just then, someone tapped on his window. He flinched slightly, then turned to see one of the officers from the day before. It was the taller one, the one who had spoken calmly and helped resolve the situation. Ryan rolled down the window. "Hey, officer," he said. The man nodded with a friendly smile. "Hey, Ryan, mind if I have a quick word?" "Sure," Ryan said, stepping out of the car. The officer leaned against his patrol car, looking thoughtful. "I just wanted to check in. We had to file a report about yesterday's incident." "It's part of the procedure," Ryan nodded. "I understand." The officer paused for a moment. "I also wanted to let you know that the woman who called us, she came by the station today." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Really?" "Yeah," the officer said. "She wanted to give her side of the story again. She admitted she might have overreacted, but she also said she felt threatened by how calm you were." Ryan gave a small, surprised laugh. "Threatened by being calm?" The officer shrugged. "People say strange things when they're embarrassed." "Anyway, we told her the investigation is closed." "The car's legally yours, and she'll likely get a warning for misusing emergency services." Ryan sighed softly. "That's fair. I don't want her to get in trouble. I just want this to be over." The officer smiled faintly. "You've got a good attitude, Ryan. Not everyone would handle it like that." They talked for a few more minutes before the officer had to leave. As Ryan watched the patrol car drive away, he felt a strange sense of closure, at least for the moment. He thought it was finally done, but it wasn't. 2 days later, the video reached local news outlets. It appeared on social media pages and online news blogs with titles like, "Woman Calls Police on Man for Using His Own Car." Some people laughed about it. Others discussed it seriously, calling it a reminder about quick judgment and bias. Ryan didn't know how to feel. His phone buzzed constantly with notifications, friend requests, and even interview offers. He ignored most of them. He didn't want fame. He wanted peace. One evening, as he was locking up the store after his shift, a familiar voice called from behind. "Hey, excuse me," he turned and froze. It was her, the same woman from that day. She stood near the entrance, holding her purse tightly. She looked different now. Not angry, not loud, just uneasy. Ryan didn't move at first. "Yes," he said carefully. She hesitated. "Can we talk?" He studied her face for a moment. There was no sign of the arrogance she'd shown before. Her tone was soft, almost apologetic. He gave a slow nod. "All right," she took a deep breath. "I wanted to say I'm sorry. I shouldn't have accused you like that. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I went too far. I didn't think it through." Ryan looked at her quietly. "You really scared me that day," he said honestly. "You called the police on me for unlocking my own car." "I know," she said quickly, eyes lowering. It was stupid. I've been replaying it in my head since then. When I saw the video online, I realized how bad it looked. I don't know what I was thinking. There was a pause. The sound of distant cars filled the silence. Ryan crossed his arms, trying to find the right words. You know, it's not just about embarrassment. Things like that can go wrong fast. If the police hadn't believed me, that could have ruined my life. She nodded slowly, guilt clear on her face. You're right. I was wrong. I shouldn't have judged you. For a few seconds, neither of them said anything. Then she looked up again. I know it doesn't fix things, but I really am sorry. Ryan studied her face, trying to see if she meant it. And she did. Her voice shook slightly when she spoke. He could see that she was embarrassed, even ashamed. He sighed softly. I accept your apology, he said finally. Just, next time, try to ask questions before you make assumptions. She nodded. I will. Thank you for not being angry with me. Ryan gave a small, tired smile. I was angry. But being angry won't change what happened. The woman thanked him again and walked away quietly, disappearing into the dim parking lot. Ryan stood there for a moment, watching her go. For the first time, he felt the tension inside him ease a little. When he got home that night, he sat on the couch and thought about the whole experience. How quickly everything had spiraled out of control. How easily a stranger's words had brought police, lights, and public humiliation. But also, how calmness and patience had saved him from something worse. He remembered how the officer had told him that day. You handled it well. Now, he understood what that meant. Over the next week, life slowly returned to normal. The story online began to fade, replaced by newer headlines. The comments slowed down and people moved on. Ryan was grateful for that. But one afternoon, while sitting in his car during his lunch break, he noticed a small note tucked under his windshield wiper. His heart jumped for a moment. He thought it might be another complaint or some prank. He stepped out and unfolded it. It was a handwritten note. It said, "Thank you for being kind when I didn't deserve it. You reminded me to slow down and think before I speak. I wish you the best." There was no name, but Ryan knew who it was from. He stood there for a while, holding the note, feeling something shift inside him. Maybe in a strange way, the whole thing had taught them both something. Later, as he drove home, he turned on the radio. The sun was setting and the streets glowed in the golden light. He thought about how one misunderstanding had turned his life upside down for a few days, but also how it had reminded him of something important. He realized that sometimes life throws chaos at you just to test who you are in the middle of it. Some people shout back, others walk away. But staying calm even when the world misjudges you is a quiet kind of strength. He didn't hate the woman anymore. In fact, he hoped she had found peace too. Because no one wins in moments like that. Both people walk away with something heavy to carry. That night, Ryan placed the note in a drawer near his bed. He didn't know why, but it felt like something worth keeping. A reminder that kindness, even in unfair moments, can change everything. He lay down, finally able to rest without replaying the scene in his mind. The parking lot, the yelling, the flashing lights, they were all fading memories now. What remained was something stronger, the knowledge that calmness and truth always find their way through noise. And as he drifted off to sleep, the city outside hummed quietly, peaceful again, just like his heart. The air in the parking lot felt heavy as the police officers stood between the woman and the young man. The flashing lights from the patrol car reflected off nearby windows, turning the quiet evening into a strange, tense scene. People had gathered around, phones out, whispering to each other. Some looked amused, others seemed frustrated, but everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. The young man stayed calm, though his heart was still pounding from the shock. He had never imagined that unlocking his own car after work could turn into something like this. The officers had already checked his license and registration, which clearly showed his name and the car's details. One of the officers even confirmed through the system that the car was registered under him. Everything was clear, yet the woman refused to accept it. She folded her arms, her expression changing from anger to disbelief. "That can't be right," she muttered loudly. "I know what I saw. That's my car. I've seen it near my neighborhood. It's been following me for days." The officer who was speaking with her raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, we've verified the registration and the license. The car belongs to him. You can even see his insurance matches the same plate and VIN number." But she wouldn't stop. "You don't understand," she said, shaking her head. These scammers know how to fake things. Anyone can print papers or steal documents these days. He probably swapped the plates or changed the numbers. The officer sighed. Ma'am, that's not how vehicle registration works. Everything checks out in our system. The young man, standing a few feet away, ran a hand through his hair, trying to stay patient. He could feel every eye on him. He wasn't angry, just tired. He had done everything right. He had stayed polite. He had explained himself clearly, but somehow this stranger had turned his simple drive home into a full public scene. A few bystanders began murmuring, saying things like, "This is ridiculous, and she won't stop even after proof." One woman stepped closer to the police, holding her phone up. "I have a full video of what happened," she said. He just walked out of the store, unlocked his car, and she came running, screaming that it was hers. The officer thanked her and asked if she could send the video to the department. The woman nodded and started sharing the footage right there. Meanwhile, the other officer turned back to the woman. "You called 911 reporting a car theft in progress. That's a serious claim. We've determined that no crime occurred. You need to understand the consequences of making a false report." The woman's face changed instantly. Her confident tone faded. "Wait, what? False report? I was just trying to help. You're blaming me for caring about my neighborhood? No one's blaming you for being cautious," the officer said calmly. "But when someone provides proof and it checks out, refusing to accept it and escalating the situation can cause unnecessary panic. You can't accuse someone without evidence." The woman started to panic a little. "I just thought he looked suspicious," she stammered. "You know how things are these days. I was only looking out for everyone's safety." The officer's voice stayed firm. "Safety is important, ma'am. But calling 911 without cause wastes emergency resources. People could have been in real danger elsewhere while we were here sorting out a misunderstanding." As the officer spoke, the crowd began to disperse slowly. Some people shook their heads, some laughed quietly, and others simply looked disappointed. A few approached the young man and told him they were sorry for what he went through. He nodded politely, grateful that some strangers still had kindness left in them. The woman, however, wasn't done. She kept insisting that she had done the right thing. "You can't find me for this," she said loudly. "I didn't commit a crime. I just made a mistake." The officer replied, "We'll make a note in the report. Whether a fine is issued will depend on the final review, but next time make sure you're absolutely certain before involving law enforcement." Her tone softened suddenly, her confidence gone. "Fine," she muttered, "but don't expect me to apologize to him. He was rude." That made a few people laugh quietly. The young man had barely said more than 10 calm sentences the entire time. He gave a tired half smile and said, "It's fine, ma'am. I just want to go home." She looked away without responding. One of the officers turned to him. "You're free to go. We're sorry for the inconvenience. You handled yourself really well." "Thanks," he said quietly. "I just didn't want this to turn into something worse." He got into his car, closed the door, and sat there for a moment. Through the windshield, he could see the woman still talking to the officers, gesturing with her hands like she was trying to prove something invisible. The flashing lights from the patrol car made the whole scene look unreal. When he finally started the engine, his hands trembled a little. The relief of being cleared was mixed with frustration. He had done nothing wrong, yet his name was probably now written somewhere in a report, all because someone couldn't believe the truth when they saw it. As he drove away, he noticed people still watching. Some waved or gave him a small nod, showing quiet support. That simple kindness meant more to him than words could explain. He gave them a nod back and turned out of the parking lot. Later that night at home, he replayed the moment over and over in his head. How quickly things had escalated, how easily one person's assumptions could cause so much chaos. It was scary in a way, knowing that even when you're completely innocent, someone's loud words can still put you in danger. He thought about how close he had come to being handcuffed or questioned just because she was convincing and loud. It didn't matter that he had all his documents. It didn't matter that he was polite. For a few minutes, his truth didn't count until someone else confirmed it. That thought stayed with him. Meanwhile, the woman went home angry and embarrassed. Though she wouldn't admit it, part of her knew she had gone too far. But instead of accepting that, she told herself she had been misunderstood, that she was the victim of an ungrateful man and careless police. The next day, word spread quickly. The video the woman had recorded before calling 911 and the clips other witnesses had filmed started circulating online. People shared it across social media, calling her the overreacting neighbor and the false alarm lady. At first, she ignored it, pretending not to notice. But as the views grew and comments poured in, she couldn't avoid it anymore. Her actions were being criticized everywhere. Some people tried to be kind, saying everyone makes mistakes, but most called her behavior unnecessary and unfair. The young man saw the videos too, though he didn't comment or share them. He didn't want to turn it into revenge or a public fight. He had learned something from the experience, that dignity isn't about proving someone wrong. It's about staying calm when the world tries to shake you. When the local news picked up the story, the police confirmed that the woman had been warned and fined for filing a false report. It wasn't a big punishment, but it was enough to remind people to think before they act. One afternoon, a reporter tried to reach the young man for an interview, but he politely declined. He didn't want attention, he just wanted peace. He went back to work, parked in the same lot, and continued his normal life. But something had changed inside him. A deeper sense of patience, a quiet understanding of how unpredictable people can be. Sometimes he saw the same police officers again when they patrolled near the store. They always greeted him with respect. One of them once said, "You handled that better than most people would have." Not many stay that calm. He smiled and replied, "It's easier when you know you're telling the truth." The story might have ended there for him, but for the woman, it was just beginning. She became known around town for that one mistake. People would whisper when she walked by, and she began avoiding public places. The whole thing had started because she thought she was helping, but her refusal to listen had turned her into the one who caused harm. For everyone who saw or heard about the incident, it became a quiet reminder. Never let assumptions take the place of facts. The young man often thought about that day, but not with anger. He thought of it as a strange test of patience, one he didn't expect but somehow passed. And even though the moment had been filled with embarrassment and tension, it showed him that truth always finds its way through, no matter how loud the noise around it. By the time the week ended, life had gone back to normal. The parking lot was just a parking lot again, the grocery store as busy as ever. But whenever he walked to his car, a few people would smile and wave, a silent sign of respect. And every time he sat in that silver car, he couldn't help but laugh a little. Not because it was funny, but because it was unbelievable that something so small could turn into such a storm. He learned that sometimes, people's fear makes them see danger where there is none, and sometimes the best way to calm the storm is not by shouting back, but by standing still, showing your truth quietly, and letting time do the rest. That's exactly what he did. And in the end, that made all the difference. The next morning, sunlight poured gently through the curtains as the young man sat at his kitchen table, sipping coffee and scrolling through his phone. His name was still trending online, not because he wanted it to, but because people couldn't stop sharing the video. Every time he saw his own face pop up on a new post, he sighed softly and put the phone aside. He didn't want fame or pity. He only wanted things to go back to how they were before that strange day. But the internet doesn't forget easily. Some people wrote messages of support, calling him patient and composed. Others turned the story into memes or funny edits. It was strange to see his quiet moment of frustration turned into entertainment. He didn't hate anyone for it. In fact, he was grateful that most people understood the truth. The video made it clear that he hadn't done anything wrong. Still, he wished it had all stayed private. Having strangers talk about your life was unsettling, even when they were on your side. Later that day, he went to work like usual. The same grocery store, the same faces, the same familiar hum of shopping carts and quiet conversations. But there was a small difference. People treated him a little differently now. Some coworkers clapped him on the back, calling him the calm guy from the video. Others asked if the woman had apologized. He just smiled and said, "No, but it's fine. I hope she learned something." Deep down, he meant it. He didn't carry anger toward her anymore. Holding on to that would only make him bitter. He figured she must have her own struggles, her own fears that made her react that way. That didn't excuse what she did. But it helped him understand that people often act out of fear more than reason. That evening, when his shift ended, he walked out to the parking lot again. The same place where everything had happened just days ago. It felt different now, quiet, calm, normal. A few cars came and went, headlights flashing across the pavement. He paused for a moment before unlocking his car, half expecting someone to shout again. But nothing happened, only the soft sound of crickets and distant traffic. He smiled and shook his head. Back to normal, he whispered to himself. As he got into his car, a familiar voice called from behind. It was the same police officer who had handled the case that day. The officer had stopped by the store to check on a small issue with the security cameras. "Hey," the officer said, walking up with a friendly grin. "Haven't seen you since that crazy day." "Yeah," the young man replied, smiling back. "It feels like forever ago, but it's only been a few days." The officer nodded. "I just wanted to say again, you handled that really well. Most people would have lost their cool in your place." "Thanks," he said. "Honestly, I just didn't want things to get worse. You never know how fast things can turn these days." The officer agreed. "You're right. Sometimes the best thing you can do is stay calm and let the truth speak for itself." They talked for a few minutes, nothing serious, just small talk about work, the weather, and how strange people can be. Before leaving, the officer said, "By the way, she was fined for making a false report. Not a huge amount, but enough to make her think twice next time." The young man nodded quietly. "That's fair. I hope she understands the damage it caused. Not to me personally, but to how people view things like this." The officer gave him a respectful nod and left. As the patrol car drove away, he sat for a while thinking about those words, how people view things like this. He realized something important. The whole situation had become bigger than him or her. It had turned into a small lesson for thousands of strangers who had watched the video. People online were discussing how easily misunderstandings could turn into chaos, and how staying calm could make a difference. Some even shared their own stories of being wrongly accused or misjudged. In a way, the painful experience had become something useful, a reminder of patience and truth in a world that often reacts before thinking. A week later, while he was walking through the neighborhood, he saw the same woman from the parking lot again. She was standing by her mailbox, looking down as if she didn't want to be noticed. He thought about walking past quietly, but something inside him told him to stop. He took a slow breath and approached. "Hi," he said gently. She looked up, startled. For a moment she didn't say anything. Then she sighed. "Oh, it's you," he nodded. "Yeah, I just wanted to say it's okay. I know things got out of hand, but I'm not angry." Her expression softened, though her eyes still showed a bit of shame. "You have every right to be angry," she admitted. "I was wrong. I shouldn't have jumped to conclusions. I don't even know what I was thinking." "It happens," he said quietly. "We all make mistakes. I'm just glad it didn't go any further." She hesitated, then said, "You probably hate me now." He shook his head. "No, I don't. I just hope next time you trust the facts first before judging someone." "That's all." There was a long pause. Then, for the first time since that day, she looked him in the eye and said, "I'm sorry. Truly. I embarrassed myself, and I embarrassed you. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I see now I caused harm." He nodded slowly. Apology accepted. The moment was quiet, but it felt meaningful. She seemed relieved, like a weight had lifted from her shoulders. After that, he continued walking, feeling lighter himself. It wasn't that he needed her apology to move on. It was that he finally saw closure, the kind that comes when two people choose understanding instead of anger. That night, he sat by his window watching the city lights flicker in the distance. His phone buzzed again with notifications about the old video, but he didn't open them. Instead, he placed the phone face down and closed his eyes for a moment. He thought about everything that had happened, the shock, the frustration, the embarrassment, the unexpected attention, and finally the peace. It was strange how one random moment could change so much. He learned that not everyone who accuses you is your enemy. Sometimes they're just trapped in their own fears. And not every bad experience has to end badly. It can teach patience, forgiveness, and a deeper understanding of people. Weeks passed, and life slowly returned to normal. The story faded from the internet as new things took its place. The woman stayed out of trouble and seemed to keep to herself. Every now and then, when their paths crossed at the grocery store or gas station, she gave a polite nod and he nodded back. No hard feelings, no bitterness, just two people who had learned something from an awkward chapter in life. Months later, one quiet Sunday afternoon, He met a group of high school students outside the store. They recognized him and said, "Hey, you're that guy from the video. You're kind of famous." He laughed softly. "Famous for what? Getting accused of stealing my own car?" They laughed too, but one of them said, "No, famous for staying calm. My mom showed me that video and said that's how you keep your cool when life throws nonsense at you." He smiled. That was probably the best compliment he could have received. As they walked away, he thought again about how unpredictable life could be. You never know when a simple moment, unlocking your car, buying groceries, walking to work, might turn into a story that the whole world sees. But what matters isn't the mistake or the misunderstanding, it's how you handle it. And he handled it with patience, honesty, and grace. That night, as he drove home under the orange glow of streetlights, he looked out at the quiet city and felt thankful that the truth came out, thankful that no one was hurt, thankful that something good grew out of something so frustrating. In a world where people rushed to judge, his story became a quiet example that calmness can still win. It reminded others that even when you're wrongly accused, you don't have to fight with anger. You can fight with truth and patience. When he parked his car and turned off the engine, he sat there for a moment, smiling to himself. The same car that had caused so much trouble now just sat there peacefully in his driveway, shining softly under the porch light. He patted the steering wheel lightly and said with a laugh, "Guess you're famous too, huh?" Then he stepped out, locked the car, and walked inside his home, closing the door on one of the strangest, most unexpected experiences of his life. And though the world soon moved on to other stories, that small moment of chaos stayed in people's minds as a reminder. Sometimes patience is the strongest response, and truth, no matter how delayed, always finds its way to the surface.